Morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Board of Supervisors to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Good morning, Supervisor Giomi. Supervisor White. Supervisor Horton. Supervisor Schutte.
Here.
Mayor Bagwell.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We're now on to our invocation, and I see Brady in the room. Would you come on up and start us off well this morning? Nope, you're first. Prayer and pledge.
Lord, we thank you so much for this opportunity to be here today. Father, we want to open our hearts and just be willing to be in a place that we can lead and guide our community, Father. Lord, I pray for peace and communication and understanding through all aspects of today, Lord. I pray for a blessing over our leaders, our supervisors, our mayor, Lord, that they have a heart and an intention to build our community for unity and a purpose that is bringing everybody together and to build our community that is profitable and is a blessing to the surrounding communities around us, Father. Lord, I pray for today's meeting and that you guide it and lead it, Father. Lord, we thank you that you are so amazing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Judge Armstrong, would you do us the honor of leading the pledge? I thought so.
Mayor, supervisors, please join me. Pledge allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We're now on to our opening public comment. I have Mr. French is signed up. Denny, good morning.
Denny French, Carson City, Nevada. Today I'd like to bring up Prison Hill as my first comment because it's one of my most emotional and figured I'd get over it before I got too nervous. The main thing is that there are certain areas that a plant's survival is really dependent on perhaps reconsidering it staying open as a option for travel on the West Basin area. And I hope that that will be considered. The plant is a monkey flower, and it's just bordering on the side of being on an endangered species list. And I spotted it in the West Basin area, and the area has been more fine-tuned by another individual that knows the area much better than myself. But the main thing is that I think I wasn't in the thought of thinking they could coexist, the habitat and vehicle use. And I have opened my thought process to considering more. And I did my due diligence, and I even feel less that they are able to be compatible. But with management, oversight, education, I think, and some closures during specific times of the year and such, it's more than possible that off-road vehicles and the environment can cohabitate. And so I'm really hopeful that there'll be some considerations in that. And also on the side of the consent area, I would like number 11, the possibility of Carson City purchasing from Marlet Lake water. I don't think that that should be considered routine. I think any considerations about our having to stretch our purse or our monies towards another area for water, even if it's to adjust for the amount of arsenic and mercury in our present water and make it to a level that's drinkable. I don't think we should be doing that. We should be considering more conservation, education on other options, and as far as yards and such. But please don't trim your plants when they've got flowers. Our bees need them. It'd be like you getting up in the morning and being told your favorite coffee shop was closed and you had to go the whole day without any. Well, they don't get off to a very good start in their break from their hibernations if we don't have plants. And watch out for your dandelions. They're their first meal in some cases because some of the plants don't bloom sooner and they come out hungry. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. We don't have anyone else signed up for general public comment, but let me ask just in case you didn't have a chance. Okay, we're going to move on then to item 6, which is approval of our minutes of April 20th, 2023. Does anyone have any corrections, updates? I'll accept a motion, please.
I move to approve the Carson City Board of Supervisors and Board of Health meeting minutes for April 20th, 2023.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to our special presentation, so if you'll all join me on the floor. So it's really always a great time to have the judges join us to celebrate our successes with our specialty courts. So come on up and I'll read and then I'll even let them speak, which might be dangerous, but there you go. Okay. So it's a proclamation in support of National Treatment Court and Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas there are now more than 4,000 treatment courts nationwide. Whereas treatment courts are the cornerstone of justice reform sweeping the nation. Whereas treatment courts have served more than 1.5 million individuals. And whereas they are recognized as the most successful justice system intervention in our nation's history. Whereas they save an average of $6,000 for every individual they serve. Whereas treatment courts substantially reduce addiction and related crime and do so at less expense than any other criminal justice strategy. Whereas there are 5 treatment courts in Carson City. Misdemeanor Treatment Court presided by Judge Tom Armstrong, this morning. Mental Health Court presided by Judge Kristen Lewis. Western Regional DUI Court and Drug Court presided by Judge Peter Breen and Judge Archie Blake. And Juvenile Drug Court presided by Juvenile Magistrate Kimberly O'Casey. Look at this. The judges are in the house. It's pretty nice. And whereas treatment courts facilitate community-wide partnerships, bringing together public safety and public health professionals to improve education, employment, housing, promote family reunification, reduce foster care placements, and increase the rate of addicted mothers delivering babies who are fully drug and alcohol-free. Yay! Whereas treatment courts demonstrate that when one person rises out of substance abuse and crime, we all rise. Now, therefore, I, Lori Bagwell, Mayor of Carson City, Nevada, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, do hereby proclaim that May 2023 be established as the National Treatment Court and Mental Health Awareness Month. And I've got to say, I've had the opportunity to attend some specialty court hearings, and it's really amazing to watch what happens and how people's lives are transformed. So I know firsthand what a great program this is. So does one of you want to speak on behalf? Briefly.
Briefly, right? From being a judge, you know there's no such thing as brief comments. Just 5 more minutes, judge, means 10 more minutes or 20 more minutes. Anyway, every month we do this as Drug Court Awareness Month, and I come here because I want to point out that, as the judges for the specialty court programs, we work very hard to make improvements in people's lives and our community's lives, or our community, right? And so, and all those people that are affected by those that are in our programs, their families, their kids, the people that love them, our public resources. But it's also a time to thank the community for the partnerships, because we don't do it alone. And we come here because first off, I'd like to thank the board for their support. The courts don't work alone. We work with good partners with the city, and it's their support that even helped me even start this court. And the city provides support. We have nonprofits we work with that support, provide treatment and resources, and that's in partnership with the city as well. The sheriff's department, the public defender's office, the district attorney's office. And I want to point out today, I want to emphasize our partnership with alternative sentencing. Alternative sentencing, the courts are separate agencies, and they're an agency of the city, but they have been really, really instrumental in supporting the success of our programs. And so we can come to court and we can send the people to treatment, but unless we have accountability and supervision, right? Unless we have a rapport with our participants, it's just a show. Unless we know that they're actually doing as well as they tell us they're doing, without drug testing, without a home visit, without contact outside of court, we don't really know what's going on. And we could not do it without the support of alternative sentencing. And I want to call up Officer Cody Peak. Officer Peak, coming up. So those of you who don't know Officer Peak, this is Officer Cody Peak. Look how sharp he looks today. I told him to dress up for you all. He is a dedicated officer by Chief Stone to be our support for the specialty court programs. He's the one who meets our participants in the field. He's the one that goes to their homes. He's the one that gives them a chat if it's not appropriate for open court, to talk to them about how they can do better, they can improve. And he is the eyes and ears in the community for us. And without his work and the ones that came before him and the ones that someday will come after him, without the support of alternative sentencing in the city, the courts wouldn't be as successful as they are. So I told you I'd keep it brief, but I wanted to point out for this month, for this year, I wanted to call special attention to alternative sentencing and their support for our programs, and they're largely, maybe mostly, responsible for our successes. And in particular, acknowledge Officer Peak here for what he does for us every day. So, thanks. And Judge Lewis, anything you want to say?
If I can briefly, and I'll be briefer than him. Mental health court started in 2005 with a collaboration of partnerships. Judge Tatro was instrumental in starting that program, and it's been a great program. As you can imagine, in our community, I know if you live here, you see we have substance abuse and mental health issues, and we're addressing all of our treatment programs are high-risk, high-needs people. Without the support of all the departments, we wouldn't be able to succeed. Many of my participants, a lot of them are going to relapse at some point in time, because staying on track with your mental health and your medications is a hard thing to do. But we've had a number of successes and people who continue to come back to my court on a regular basis to show me how well they're doing. They're employed. Many of them have obtained their degrees, have gone back to work, held jobs, stayed out of the system. We have the MOST team who frequently brings people to us. They've already been working with them for a long period of time. What I want to express to you is, while they're in our program, the cost savings to the community, the sheriff's office involvement, the constant attention that comes, goes away. And sometimes it might come back over time and we get people back in the program. But that's a good thing, because there's structure when they're in the program, they stay on track, and it's a tremendous benefit to the community. We've had many of the Board of Supervisors come and observe. Just want to let you know what we're doing. It's important. I think we've had approximately 75 graduates since we started tracking numbers in 2017. I would love to go back to 2005 and see what that looks like. But just since January of 2022, we've had 8. And so they're gainfully employed, going to school, and not draining the resources of the community. So it's awesome. And thank you. And the Sunrise House, I would like to point out too, is a tremendous benefit to both programs as well. And Officer Peak is involved in monitoring that location as well. So thank you. Judge Ocasey, did you want to say anything about juvenile court?
I just want to say thank you. It's important that our community stakeholders know what we're doing, helping those in need, to include our juveniles and their families. Our juveniles always get excited when I tell them about what we're doing here, and I'll tell them on Tuesday. And they're always appreciative that the community supports them. You know, we all have times of need, and when we have our kids in times of need, it's kind of a special event to be able to help them and put these supports around them, so that they hopefully don't end up in the adult system and in the adult treatment courts. But if they do, it's kind of a comfort to know that they're there and that they're working. And we're trying to work with them at the younger ages and kind of get them the support that they need. And so they really do appreciate your guys' support through this. And you are a stakeholder of all of our courts. And so we appreciate you. And it's important that you know what we're doing. So thank you for doing this. I appreciate it every year. Thank you.
pretty special group we have up here. Is there anybody else that wants to join in the picture? I see Miss Stone. Don't you want to come in? Come on. It is a community that gets this done. There's no doubt about that. So. Again, thank you all so very much. It's such an honor all the time to. Oh, it's important. Important. Have a good day in court. Safe day. Okay, we're going to move on to our next proclamation. So is Darren, did I see Darren? Here he comes. Do you have some more of the Public Works team? Yeah, let's just bring the team in. Come on. It's a celebration. Let's bring that Public Works team. Look at this. Congratulations, Mr. Cooley. Okay. So we're going to guess, right? It's National Public Works Week. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Carson City, Nevada. Whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, who are engineers, technicians, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities that are essential for our citizens. Whereas the year 2023 marks the 63rd annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association. Now, therefore, I, Lori Bagwell, Mayor of Carson City, Nevada, do hereby proclaim the week, May 21 through 27, 2023, as National Public Works Week. I urge all citizens to pay tribute to our public works professionals, technicians, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. And if you'd like, I'll just plug it right now, right? And if you'd like to get to know some of these wonderful professionals in our Public Works Department, they're having a great event on Saturday from 10 to 2. Stop by the Public Works yard and see all the neat things you can do. And please bring kids because it's super fun. I don't have any grandchildren living near me anymore, but the duck races and ponds, anyway, all that was fun. So please do that. Do you guys want to say anything? We want to also congratulate Mr. Cooley to his promotion since he's here. We'll do that publicly. And the other one standing next to him, I just don't have words for the fact that he thinks he could leave Carson City. But what a great job you did, Mr. Stuckey, and we're so very appreciative. Public Works really does touch almost everything that we do. And I think it's an understatement if I don't make that clear that they really are integral department to what we do in this city. So let's give them just a big round of applause. I know I can stand in front of them. I don't block anyone. Thank you all so very much. It's really appreciative. Okay. And he doesn't get to go far because he might put someone in here. So let's see, we're going to do Jennifer's. So we have, we love to do our longevity awards. We have John Duran from the Parks Maintenance Coordinator. 10 years. 10 years. Thank you so much. It's another department that does so vastly much for us. So tell us a little bit about the success of John.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Budge. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. So proud to be here to talk about John Dorn here today. John's been our dedicated dedicated to Carson City since his first day of employment with the Parks Department. As Parks Coordinator during the past 10 years, John's been responsible for overseeing all operations at Fuji and Mills Parks, as well as managing daily operations of neighborhood parks and non-turf landscape areas. John has been an integral part of the team by teaching staff and leading by example in the field. John has always been available to help the department during emergency situations and off-hour events, especially being reassigned to Public Works during emergencies like during the last flooding. So John was so much help. He's always there when you need him. John grew up in Carson City. He's a great member of our community. When not at work, John has been an avid supporter of his daughter's sports and activities. John has also volunteered his time coaching youth sports while his daughters have participated. Between 2 daughters and multiple sports, John and his wife have traveled all over in support of their kids. He never misses a game or activity. John's consistency and dedication have truly made him an asset to Carson City Park Maintenance. Thanks so much, John.
Okay. How about Jared Whitaker with 5 years our open space maintenance coordinator? I'll bet she has a few words for you too.
We do. We have a lot. We can always say a lot about Jared. Jared Whitaker has been the open space maintenance coordinator for the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department since 2018. Jared has become critical to maintaining over 7,000 acres of open space property throughout Carson City. Jared is truly versed in all things maintenance, excelling in everything from noxious weed abatement, restoration, fabrication and welding, equipment operation, and so much more. Additionally, Jared is a certified arborist, and he lends his skill set to managing trees throughout both parks and open space. This represents a significant cost saving for the city, and we can complete many tree evaluations and maintenance projects in-house and avoid significant contractor expenses, which is a big help for the city. Jared came to the city in 2018 from NDOT, and has been an arborist that's worked both domestically and abroad, everywhere from the Bay Area to New Zealand. He grew up in Gardnerville and is dedicated husband and amazing father to 2 wonderful girls. When not with the family, Jared loves spending time outdoors, fishing at Pyramid, riding his dirt bike at Prison Hill. Jared's also an avid traveler and has an amazing adventure stories of his time spent in the trees in New Zealand or navigating canoes or mopeds through Vietnam. Everything Jared does, he does to the highest quality with integrity and a positive attitude. Jared's dedication to his work, along with his incredible initiative and attitude, make Jared a critical asset to Carson City and is such a pleasure to work with. Thanks so much, Jared.
Okay. And then we have, which is news to me, I looked at this and thought, what? So which name do you want? Carol? Yeah, I thought so. So Carol Akers with our Purchasing and Contracts Administrator. 5 years. I just can't believe that. Come on up. I think it's because our Human Resources Department does this, so they take your technical names, but I wouldn't have known who this was. It's like, yeah. So, Miss Paulson, tell us a little bit about Carol.
All right, so Carol plays a vital role in the city manager's office as well as the entire city as the Purchasing and Contracts Administrator. So if you want to make a large purchase or put a project out to bid, Carol's the gatekeeper, and she is certainly diligent in making sure that all the policies and procedures are followed, which keeps all of us out of trouble. She always has a cheerful disposition and a smile on her face. Her creativity is reflected in every door decoration and pumpkin carving contest that we have. If we didn't have Carol, we'd be in last place for sure. Oh, sorry, except for those guys. A few other things you may not know is that she holds the title of the 2022 Super Striker in a bowling match amongst the city's best and brightest. I think she would have had a perfect game, except some of us may have messed her up on one of the frames. And she's responsible for our fairly regular ice cream socials in our office. Needless to say, she contributes greatly to our office morale. And we've just found out her husband's here, and we just found out that he was an official ice cream scooper for Thrifty back in the day. So we may have to enlist some of his help. So all kidding aside, we're very thankful to have Carol as part of our team. And due to the additional federal funding we've received over the last few years, the city has more contracts and bids than ever before. And she works diligently with all the departments to stay ahead of the deadlines and keep everything running smoothly. Thank you, Carol.
She really is a joy to have in the office. It's someone I've gotten to know really well, and she's really a great grandma too. So I'll just throw that in there. No, you got to stay. Oh no, you don't get to leave. You know, remember, if we don't have pictures, it didn't happen. So the next one we have with 5 years of service is Samantha Torres, our sergeant. Yay, come on up. Hi. Thank you so much for your service. You have a grateful community. And can you do less than the judges?
I'm gonna
Yeah, no.
brevity. I can do it. No, you can't. I can. Watch this shit. Ooh, you can't say that on. No. Sorry about that. Oh, this is a pleasure. Come on over here. This is an absolute pleasure. Sergeant Torres has been with the Sheriff's Office for 5 continuous years, notably 11 combined years in law enforcement, as she was a draft pick out of Douglas County. Yes. And I'll get back to that in a moment. Sergeant Torres has span of assignments have included the detention center, patrol operations, an amazing tenure with our special enforcement frontline team here in the community. Just amazing accomplishments and leadership in that area. Over in detectives, she spent a period over there and was recently promoted to supervision. Probably the most difficult position in law enforcement all the way across the country. She has to be out there making those decisions on the spot. Samantha's leadership, mentoring skills, and professionalism on duty are emulated in her off duty. Her husband's over here with the family. So I want to close by noting just a couple of things. Yes, this weekend is a busy weekend for the city. Public Works is having an event. The Sheriff's Office will be doing a Cops and Kids event down at the main building with an open house. And today is UNR graduation day. And Ms. Torres is a UNR, what do they call it? Hall of Famer, inducted last year for her sports activities. So yes, we employ. Dude, if you have seen her work, you would say football. Absolutely finest example of law enforcement here in Carson City. Thank you.
We're so very proud. I would really love it if the family members or other teammates would come on up and join in the pictures, because it's really what it's all about, right? It's your life-work balance. And how do we do that? And it seems like because you carry them. Yeah. Oh, hi. Oh my God. So do we have everyone? Can we do it? Get in. We might have to squeeze. I don't know. Can he do it from across the room? More? Oh yeah. Carol. Oh, great. That's right. That's right. He's like, I gotta take a lot more pictures to make it work. There you go. Okay, well, thank you all so very much for celebrating our employees with us. We're gonna take just a brief recess to let the room clear for a moment, and then we'll get back onto the agenda. Consent agenda. Does any member want an item pulled for discussion? It was requested from the public that we talk about 11A, so I will accept a motion for everything except for item 11A.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item 8A, 9A, 10A, 12A, which has resolution number 2023-R-10, 13A, 13B, and 13C as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second.
In a second, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We will now take up agenda item 11A. Is that going to be Darren and Eddie? Come up. And just briefly give us what this agreement does. Thank you.
Good morning. Darren Schultz for the record. This agreement is a short-term agreement to continue for Carson City to receive water from the Marlette-Hobart water system. We are in negotiations or discussions, more discussions, less negotiations with the state for a long-term agreement. We have been in discussion for the last year, and we were hoping to have that finalized, but we're not quite to the finish line. So this is just a kind of a bridge agreement to get us through one more year temporarily, with the idea that over the next year, hopefully sooner than later, months, that we'll come back to you with a long-term agreement that will take us into decades into the future.
And how long have we been utilizing water from Marlette? I was going to say, I would just wanted that on the record because I think some people thought this was procuring new water, and it is not.
No,
It's
Eddie Collier for the record. It's, as Kurt just said, about 40 years or so, or longer. And the state was bringing in that water to state facility buildings prior to that. So I think they took it over in the 1960 or so.
perfect. Does any member of the board have any specific question on this? No? Is there a member of the public that would like comment on this item? Mr. French?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to hear that it's been 37 years. Do understand that, did on the onset, but I do suggest that when we suggest as a city, we are set as far as water and have enough just based on what we're receiving from our hills and mountains and aquifers. And I think that's been the wrong thought by myself, is that if we're self-sustainable, and we really aren't, we're really part of this state, and we're requesting water on a regular basis for certain considerations and concerns. And we should start considering conserving and more education about circumstances of our actual water system, not just to say, hey, we've got it covered. State situations are precarious. There are several litigation or bills related to groundwater and surface water and preservation of it in session now, or the session now, if they haven't been dropped. Thank you very much for the consideration and appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. French. Is there anyone else with public comment on this item? Don't see any. I'll accept a motion.
I move to approve the agreement as presented.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. Thank you so much. We're now on to agenda item 15A, which is discussion and possible action regarding the appointment of one member to the audit committee for the partial term ending December 2024. Is Mr. Scalia here?
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for applying for the position. We're thrilled to have community support for the things that we do. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what excites you about the audit committee?
Absolutely. I have lived in Northern Nevada for roughly 20 years or so. I've spent some time in the Pacific Northwest and through California, and nothing says home like Nevada. So I really want to give back to the community that's done so much for me. I am currently a divisional compliance leader for a large pharmacy. So I go through and I review and I audit pharmacies and I look for what the DEA would look for. Same thing with Board of Pharmacy. So I'm in there making sure that our communities are staying safe. And what I mean by that is keeping an eye that there's no, they call them pill mills or folks out there that are taking advantage of the prescriptions. And I do that across 5 states for my whole division. So I really want to focus in on Nevada because it's truly my home.
Wonderful, thank you. Stacy, you want to go next?
I'll just ask one question. You know, in the realm of compliance and audit, and since you're sort of in that world, what do you find to be the most difficult aspect when you're doing an audit or a compliance audit?
You know, it's a really good question. It boils down to you've got teams and people who, you know, think that they're doing the right thing or they're trying to help out their community or they're doing what they feel would be the best move, but in reality, it's either against a company policy, it's against maybe a law that they're not aware of, or the Board of Pharmacy, anything to that effect. So having that engagement with those folks who think that they're doing the right thing, but they're truly not, is a difficult portion because you have to come in. I've been in sales as well, so sales is a gray area, right? Like we can talk and we can laugh and we can have, you know, right? We can have fun. But when you start getting into compliance and you start getting into auditing, especially with the federal government or our local government, it's no longer a gray area, it's a black and white. So you take situations that you've got folks that are in that gray area, and it may, excuse me, it may be a simple mistake. For getting a signature on a a Class 2 drug invoice is like a $10,000 fine through the DEA, which is punishable by up to including termination because it's a huge deal. So somebody making a couple of mistakes, it's very difficult to hold them accountable, or not, it's not difficult to hold them accountable, it hurts to hold them accountable because it's just a simple mistake. But in our world, the government, it's very difficult to, you know, not hold them accountable.
Well, you've just confirmed what I've thought, that auditors are less fun. So I mean,
We really
I heard you say that. So
we really are.
Sales.
We really are. Yeah. No, yeah. I agree. I agree. But
Supervisor White,
Yes.
a question?
So just basically a clarification rather than a question. I notice in your application, the education section is blank. You didn't put anything in there for the education portion. Why is that blank?
a high school diploma. I didn't go to college.
Okay.
Mr. Horton?
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to thank you for stepping up. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Schutte?
Thank you, and I as well. You know, listening to you speak, the fact that you historically in your job as an auditor, or as somebody who helps facilitate that, you know, creating that opportunity of engagement and that opportunity to look at potential issues that need to be addressed. And as you said, sometimes people are feeling like they're doing the right thing, but in reality, the requirement is different. And then being open to that remediation plan is just so important. So thank you for applying, and I'm really comfortable with your application.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Do you have any final words you want to share? Or?
I do want to thank everybody for their time. I know we're all extremely busy, so I do appreciate it. And I think that one of the most important aspects of being an auditor or reviewer, whatever we want to call it, is having that dynamic and that personality to where folks feel comfortable. Because it's easy for somebody to come in and pretend that they're the IRS or pretend that they're this big bad government organization, when in reality, my goal is to find out what's going on and then correct it accordingly. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion? Supervisor Shooty.
Thank you. Sorry. Now I'm drawing a blank here. I'm looking at the wrong paperwork, sorry. Okay. I move to appoint Joseph, and then it's Scalia?
Scalia.
Scalia, I'm sorry
That's
about that.
okay.
That was
Everybody
my-
says.
With the last name Shooty, I get it. It's to fill the partial term expiring December 2024.
Motion and a second to appoint Joseph Scalia to the partial term expiring in December of 2024. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous, and welcome to the team.
Thank you very much.
We look forward to working with you.
As do I.
Okay, we're now going to go to agenda item 15B, which is discussion and possible action regarding coordination of legislative activity pending before the Nevada legislature. Mr. Wood.
Good morning, everybody. Stephen Wood for the record. I wanted to start by letting you all know that this week has already been crazy, and it's only going to get crazier because Friday, excuse me, Friday is the deadline for Second House Committee passage. So one of the things I want to talk to you about today was heard last night at a meeting that started at 6:30 p.m., and I expect that to continue today and tomorrow as well. So I'll start with an update on some of the bills that you guys have previously taken action on and quickly tell you where they stand. SB 16, the Carson City Charter Bill, was voted out of committee last Friday. So that will be moving to a full vote in the Assembly. And once that is done, likely next week, it will go to the governor. Is one of the few bills this legislative session that has not been amended. So we're very proud of that, actually, because every single one of the other bills that I'm about to tell you about has been amended multiple times. So it sounds simple, but that's actually quite a feat to get a bill out, especially this session, without an amendment. Next, SB 22, which is NACO's bill that allows for electronic publication of legal notices. That bill passed out of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs as well. And AB 60, which is the League of Cities bill that changes the process for the update of assessment rolls for neighborhood improvement districts. That bill passed out of committee yesterday. I do want to let you know SB 51, which is the NACO's pay bill. That bill did unfortunately die in committee at the last deadline. I wanted to bring it up, though, because there is an effort to get the language of that bill amended into another. Hopefully that happens. We're waiting to see by the end of this week. But the bill that they are trying to amend it into is exempt. So we have until the end of session. I know you guys supported that measure, so the bill itself is dead, but the language may find its way into something else. Assembly Bill 104, which is Assemblywoman Dickman and Assemblyman O'Neill's bill that gives incorporated cities extra BDRs for the purposes of changing their charter. This bill is not exempt, so we have until the end of the week to get it a hearing. I have a couple meetings as soon as I leave here to try and get that done. But the Senate Majority Leader is asking for an amendment to further restrict the number of BDRs. So we'll see. However, I'm confident if the bill gets to work session with the two possible amendments that she is suggesting, that Carson City will still get the ability to use this provision if we get it to work session. So that's my goal for the end of today. Next, I wanted to update you on two amendments, actually. The first is to SB 226, and this bill was heard, or at least the financial piece of this bill was heard last night in Senate Finance. And there's an amendment that changes the scope of the bill quite a bit. And I'm not at the end of this, I'm not necessarily going to recommend that you guys take any further action, but I think that this amendment is worth bringing to your attention because it does, like I said, change the scope of the bill. So I'll run through it briefly. The amendment removes provisions that state that prevailing wage must be paid on all projects that use any public money. So that was the broadest piece of this bill. They're stripping that language and instead refocusing it on projects that happen on land that is owned or leased or under a lease purchase agreement with a public body. Which I think I told you when we first discussed this bill was kind of the crux of the matter for them. They wanted to make sure that public bodies weren't leasing out land to a developer or whoever would do the project, and then with the agreement that it would come back to specifically for the purpose of avoiding paying prevailing wage. Next, I know we had a discussion about, well, if we waived a fee or something along those lines, then it would trigger prevailing wage. So they've clarified that in the amendment as well. So any fees or credits or anything like that that's given has to add up to $100,000 or more before prevailing wage would be triggered. And then lastly, they exempted affordable housing projects from the provisions of the bill. So I know that was one of the other big concerns that we had.
Mayor, may I?
Yes, absolutely.
Stephen, on the, did you say land leased to or leased from? So if, so as an
Or
example, if Clark County has a facility and they lease the facility to a nonprofit to provide services, and that nonprofit wants to raise their own funds and do their own improvements, would it still require prevailing wage if it were over 100,000?
So it's
not
a
leased
great
from, but it's
question.
leased
So,
to.
right, when they discussed the leasing piece of this during the committee hearing, they specifically, their intention, although I would agree that it's probably not clear in the language, even with this amendment, but they did put it on the record. The legislative intent seems to be relatively clear, although that is difficult to enact, that they are talking about a public body that would lease out property for some kind of public work project with the agreement that it would come back to the ownership of the city or county or state agency, and so that they wouldn't have to pay prevailing wage while the project was happening.
I think about just as an example, a Northgate complex, which we own and we lease out to businesses, nonprofits that do good in this community. And if they wanted to, of their own volition, replace the HVAC, for instance, it would be
So let me
the roof.
Right.
It would be a shame.
Let me read this subsection to you, and this is new language in an amendment. So it says the property or premise on which a project will be constructed or developed are in whole or in part subject to a lease or lease purchase agreement by a public body.
Okay, so it
It's a
sounds like
lease.
that wouldn't apply in the case where it's going the other way.
Because they are
A
talking
lease is
about,
a two-part document that doesn't designate a single
well, they're
action
talking
there.
about construction or development. So I'm not sure, like, I think what
It's
you're
not
talking
to
about
them.
is maintenance.
And they're saying where it would come back to them.
Right.
No.
Well,
Read it
okay,
again.
I'll read it again.
Purchase agreement.
Sorry.
The property or premises on which a project will be constructed or developed are in whole or in part subject to a lease or lease purchase agreement by a public body.
We could use a little clarity.
I
Just-
agree. Yeah.
And I appreciate their intent, and I
Yes.
think we might agree with the intent.
I think
But it
this
would
this
be
amendment.
Sure, I agree
helpful,
with the intent, but
right, it would be
Yeah, well-
helpful if they would clarify that.
Yeah.
Instead of on the record, putting it in the bill.
yeah, I mean, particularly if, I don't know if they can come up with an exemption for nonprofits,
That's
if
it,
they can,
right.
I mean, that really, I can think of a lot of instances in my real job where it would be a real issue, in this job where we are trying to have our nonprofits, do things that we as government can't do or won't do or would be too expensive to do. And if we have to, add 20 or 30% to a prevailing wage job, it's a little scary.
Yep, I would agree. So I understand that this bill is still not good, and that's why I said I don't think you should take any further action, because the action you did take, I think is appropriate. But I wanted to let you know that there is movement on this bill to make it at least a little bit better. And I will tell you that this bill has not made it out of the Senate yet because it is exempt.
Right.
So it still has to go through the full vetting process in the Assembly, where there is still plenty of chances to refine this language further.
Thank you.
The second amendment I wanted to let you know about is on SB 235. I know Mayor Bagwell is very familiar with what I'm about to talk about. This bill originally, so it deals with the 48-hour hearing process for pretrial release hearings.
Where are those judges? They need to come back. in
Well,
today. They were here this morning.
I did speak with Judge Armstrong
Okay.
before he left.
good.
So
We're trying.
the original bill allowed for continuances in that process if all parties agreed to those continuances. The League of Cities, the Nevada Association of Counties, the DA's Association all came together and proposed an amendment in the original bill hearing that would have changed it to 72 hours and excluded weekends and holidays. Of course, that amendment died on arrival. However, it started a conversation. And so that conversation developed this amendment, and I'll tell you about the two critical pieces of this. And Judge Armstrong thinks that this is great progress and wanted me to let you know that he is supportive of this. So first, it allows, as long as it happens within an 8-hour period, it allows us to start the clock on the 48 hours, not at time of arrest, but at time of booking. So that allows clarity. I know there were plenty of discussions about sometimes it's really hard to start that clock at time of arrest if somebody has to go to the hospital, for instance, after they've been arrested. There are plenty of circumstances that can make that difficult. So we've changed it to time of booking. And then there is an appropriation in this bill now. It goes to all of the counties with the exception of Washoe and Clark. Carson City in this proposed language is set to receive $46,800 for the biennium. Each fiscal year. Each fiscal year. That money is to be used for paying judges, district attorneys, and public defenders an additional stipend for coming on weekends and holidays to hear these cases. It comes from the state general fund and is to be used for the specific staffing purposes if those 48-hour hearings have to happen during weekends and holidays when the courts would normally be closed. However, one of the issues that we do have present relative to Carson City is that this money cannot be used to pay for other staffing costs outside of judges, district attorneys, and public defenders. So our bailiffs, court clerks, those things are not included. However, Judge Armstrong did say that this extra funding to pay for the judges, district attorneys, and public defenders will give them more flexibility to do some additional things for clerks and bailiffs and those other positions in the court. So I wanted to let you know about those amendments and progress of certain bills, and I'll take any questions or anything you guys have.
Any member have a question? It's almost over. Trying to get there.
Yeah, 18 days. I think we can make it. But who's counting?
I'm not to public comment yet. Just a moment. I'm getting there. So no member has a Supervisor Giomi?
I would just want to thank Steve, and I know what you're doing is a lift, and I appreciate your efforts on our behalf, really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there any public comment, Mr. French?
Yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't catch all your presentation. Supervisor and board. In efforts to coordinate personal matters, I had to step out, but I do want to say I've been doing my due diligence, looked up all that you had on the agenda as far as bills, and this one had me concerned, had lots of questions actually. But when you referred to the changes, did they change section? I missed. So did they change? Can I direct my?
No, everything has to come,
Okay.
just ask your questions to the chair, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
As I was out, and I apologize for that, but it was unavoidable. Very,
Which
Please.
legislation, which bill number?
well, this is bill number SB 226 relating to payment of
Prevailing
employees.
wage.
Right.
Mhm.
Section, and I'm not sure how they relate. It's number 29 or 24, and it's suggesting for public monies for public buildings, jails, public roads, public highways. These are the employees of those circumstances, so that would be the equipment or the contractors. But did anything on that change at all? Did they take anything physically off of that? And then,
No.
okay, nothing was changed on the
No, the only
main-
thing they did is exempt affordable housing.
Okay,
from,
and I
so-
was going to bring that up. So are you going to still be in support of this bill as he suggested? It stands now?
We were not in support of this
You were not,
legislation.
you were not,
Right,
okay,
we were a no on this one.
okay. Misunderstood the agenda.
It's
Thank
okay.
you.
He was just informing us of things that are happening, because sometimes your position does change when they amend things that
Right.
you objected to.
So I missed
but
some
we're
of
not
the.
quite there yet. We're
Right.
close.
I missed some of the agenda amendments, but I see this gentleman getting himself around over there, and I really appreciate his efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mayor.
Do I have any other public comment on this item?
Thank you.
No? Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 16A, which is discussion and possible action regarding our proposed East Carson City area drainage plan. Who's gonna start us on this one? Mr. Stuck, you're gonna start us off. Okay, great. Brianna.
Right, good morning, everyone. I'm Brianna Greenlaw, the Carson City Stormwater Program Manager for the record. We're excited to be here today to present the East Carson City Area Drainage Master Plan. Before we begin, I'll provide just a few details on the steps leading up to this study. In 2018, the board approved the Regional Floodplain Management Plan. This plan provided guidance for floodplain management activities throughout the Carson River watershed. One of the activities identified for Carson City was to study the east area that includes the Pinion Hills watershed that has experienced flooding in the past. Then in 2021, the board adopted and approved the Carson City Hazard Mitigation Plan. This plan outlines goals to promote and increase city involvement in hazard mitigation projects and reduce flood loss and damage in the city. So in partnership with Carson's Water Subconservancy District, staff has continued to evaluate flood mitigation projects throughout the city in line with the goals from both of these adopted plans. So now I'd like to introduce Stephanie Bell and Karen Peternell with Micro Baker International, the consultant that completed the East Carson City Area Drainage Master Plan, and they will present some slides about the study. Thank you.
To be green. There you go.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yes, as she said, my name is Stephanie Bell. I'm a professional engineer, and my colleague is Karen Peternell. She's a hydrologist and certified floodplain manager, and we are with the consultant Michael Baker International. We want to recognize our project partners in this, Carson City Public Works, the Carson Water Subconservancy District, who is the administrator of this grant that was received from FEMA. So again, the purpose of this project was to evaluate the Pinion Hills area of East Carson City for flooding risk, and then to propose some solutions to mitigate that risk. Goals of the project were to collect data. So we looked at existing drainage information, whether that be topographic resources, records on culverts, and other public sources such as parcel data. We then wanted to identify and quantify the flood risk, so we ran an engineering software model called HEC-RAS. It calculated the hydrologic and hydraulic components of that watershed and gave us a flood map at the end of the day. We then collected information from residents through a couple of public outreach efforts, which we'll explain in more detail. And then we prepared a flood hazard strategy to develop some cost-effective project alternatives and then establish public support for these mitigation projects. So our study area is the east portion of Carson City. We have about a 6 square mile watershed listed here. Part of that is populated with about 100 residences that make up the Pinion Hills neighborhood. And so the watershed is again on the east side of the Carson River. It flows from east to west from the Pinion Hills towards the Carson watershed, or towards the Carson River. So it ends up being several individual drainage washes that some of them do come through and affect that neighborhood. So I'll turn it over to Karin to describe public outreach number 1.
So in these projects, it's important to let the residents know what's happening, especially in these rural areas. And so we started with just a typical of these projects. We had a meeting at the sheriff's office where we invited the residents. We had one person show up and 2 via Zoom. So we presented the information, but then we realized after that, okay, we need to do some more targeted outreach. So in conjunction with Nevada's Flood Week in November, we sent out a mailing to the local residents and said, we'll be at the Bryan Building for Flood Week. You can meet with the city staff and us, and then also we'll be walking out in the field that day. We'll be just walking in the neighborhood trying to talk to residents. And that was actually very fruitful because we talked to a couple of people at that meeting. And as Supervisor Joming commented last night, sometimes it only takes speaking to one person who can then get you with everybody else in the neighborhood. So that was very successful. And then we had a third outreach event where one of the things we learned from that second meeting was that a lot of the people, if it doesn't directly affect them, they're not going to come to these public outreach meetings. So we said, okay, we're going to make very targeted mailings to the people that are only directly affected and say, okay, here's what we're looking at. Here's what might happen in your neighborhood. And therefore, we're going to be out walking around again. Feel free to come talk to us. And that was a very effective outreach. And we had people come out and talk to us. We had people show us around their yards, and they were even willing to have the actual drainage improvements on their property. So it was really, really effective. And with respect to outreach, I think in the future, in some of these meetings, we've had the meetings at the governor's mansion. And as a lifelong Nevada resident, I've never been to the governor's mansion. So I think that'd be a great way to get more outreach in these types of projects, is having meetings such as that instead of the sheriff's office. And let's see, I'll have you go to the next one. And so, as I said, we sent out these very specific mailings just to these few residents and had very successful talks with them. And this helped us define our alternatives further from there.
Sure. So as you mentioned, we identified 4 areas of interest to look at. Those are Sedge Road, Laurel Road, Juniper Road, and Pinion Hills Drive. Goals of the design were to mitigate up to a 25-year level of protection. And then we also wanted to utilize the city right-of-way and so limit impacts to private property. And then we also took a look at the existing conditions, downstream conditions, and tried to mitigate any of those situations. So again, we're not just pushing the problem downstream. So we developed some alternatives. Again, we were scoped to do 3 concept plans for 3 areas. So for this one in particular, we looked at Laurel Road, and I think that this was the resident that was the most willing to talk to us about what he wanted to see in particular happen. And he gave us additional information about private culverts that we didn't know about had we not physically gone and visited his property. So we also wanted to make sure that the downstream storm drain capacity was able to handle whatever we were diverting. And then we also wanted to see if we could mitigate some of those 100-year flood depths. So in this case, actually I'll go back to this one. So we came up with a couple of alternatives, either using a culvert and ditch sort of diversion scenario, or a diversion to a longer run of pipe that would take things through the right-of-way and down to the outlet at the Carson River. So again, so the three projects we looked at, Pinion Hills, we were able to get a 25-year level of service. This is the one that has the combination of culvert and ditch, because there were higher flow rates exhibited here, and the channel has more an open channel has more capacity to handle those flows. Laurel Road, this one in particular has a pretty significant head cut at the end of the drainage. So this is down towards the Carson River floodplain. So we looked at a rock apron and stilling basin configuration to try to mitigate the head cut that's already happening there, because as we know in engineering, if we just continue to put more flow down there, the head cut is just going to continue to erode, and we don't want that to happen. It is in a position where it could affect private property. And then we also looked at Juniper Road, which is another scenario where we proposed diverting the stormwater and taking it into an underground system. So promised we would keep it short and sweet today. So the next steps, we're looking at approval of the plan from the Board of Supervisors. And then we will continue to work towards pursuing some funding opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you. Does any member have a question? Supervisor White?
Is that a surprise? Thank you. Let's start with an easy one first. On page 236, where you have the kind of the layout, what the plan's going to be at the top, that's labeled as Pinion Hills Road. Actually, the name of that road is Pinion Hills Drive.
Okay.
So throughout this document, you talk about the area is.
It's your 6-49.
Thank you. Thanks.
Just if you can give them, if you have a
Oh,
page,
okay.
because they're in a different report way.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll try to keep up with that.
Okay.
Throughout the document, it talks about this area is mostly single-family 1 acre. So if you get to page 317, which is, well, it says 3 of 6. It's at the beginning of the Hazard US, that very first study.
Are you talking about the hazardous report in the appendix?
Right. So it says that the area is 1 square mile with 2,000 households. A square mile with 1 acre single-family zoning can only have 640. There's only 640 acres in a square mile. How do you get 2,000 households in that square mile?
Correct. So HAZUS is a proprietary software that's made available through FEMA. It's often referred to when you do step for and apply for federal grant funding. So we ran the HAZUS report, and the smallest aggregate of aerial data that you can use for that is the census block grant. So this is actually for the census block grant, which is larger than the study area that we looked at. So I believe the block grant is about 63 square miles. Our study area is about 6. So it's included in the HAZUS report. But again, the HAZUS is really just included as a reference tool for future benefit cost analyses, which would need to provide a lot more significant or a lot more specific data.
That doesn't compute for me. I understand what you're saying, but when you specifically call out a square mile with 2,000 households, somewhere along the line, you've got to get this default program to line up with reality of what you put on the paper.
Right. So the report is just auto-generated. It's not something we can really manipulate, and it's just, again, it's just included in the appendix as a reference.
Okay.
Whose software is it?
FEMA.
Okay, so again, it's not.
I
just
can't
wanted to make sure
manipulate
it's
it,
not
yeah.
one we can, or you as a contractor can change. It's what FEMA uses.
Comment
Yeah, so
for a
there-
second and
sorry.
just give a little background on
Yeah.
HAZUS. HAZUS is used by emergency managers, planners, floodplain managers. It's a software package that the federal government contracts with that allows you to develop a cost-benefit analysis on running certain hazards and making a determination on mitigating those hazards. So it isn't really designed for data accuracy. It's designed for broad strokes, 30,000 foot level analysis to give the feds an understanding, if you're applying for pre-disaster mitigation funds, an idea to them as to what kind of benefit the community might realize for mitigating a certain hazard.
And it gives consistency.
Right,
across
it gives
the entire
consistency
United
so that
States.
everyone's using the same sort of basis for comparing benefit cost analysis from one community to another.
So consistently inaccurate statements of 1 square mile.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think the data itself is inaccurate. They pull it out of the last census, but it's overly broad. That's probably the best way to look at it. It's overly broad.
On page 321, it talks about 2 buildings will be moderately damaged with $2.5 million in damage.
Thank you.
How did 2 buildings being moderately damaged add up to $2.5 million in damage?
So it's the building stock damage is just part of the report. It also estimates debris damage.
On page 322, it says that only residential buildings will be damaged. There's a lot more than residential out there. How is the damage going to be isolated to just 2 residential buildings?
Again, I'm not sure how that was calculated specifically. The tool is just used as a general overview of the community. It's usually done on like a county level.
Okay. Page 323 says that only wooden buildings will be damaged. However, just an easy drive through the neighborhood, there are 13 masonry buildings and 15 steel buildings. How will the damage be isolated to only wooden buildings?
I don't specifically know why the report says the damage is limited to wooden buildings. Again, there's a disclaimer at the beginning of the report that says it's based on engineering and available federal data. So it could be just aggregated to a level that it's not specific to the neighborhood we're speaking about.
On page 324, it says that a school will be damaged. I don't know if a school is built out of wood.
Right, so this school is probably not referring to our specific neighborhood, but part of that census block grant, which is included in this HAZIS analysis.
That's all I have.
Brianna Greenlaw for the record. This is just to give a little background on this HAZIS and the benefit cost ratio. So this East Carson area drainage plan, like with our other drainage master plans, is a scoping planning level document. So this really provides us the ability to leverage funds, react, plan for our capital improvement projects, and know how we can best help mitigate flooding. That's different in all of these different areas. And so as part of these reports, the consultants come up with these benefit cost ratios, because if we are to be competitive in the FEMA funds, we need to have a benefit cost ratio of 1.0 or greater. When they're doing this planning level study, it's a conceptual 10% level look at things. And so they're taking the benefit that's produced in this report, that's a FEMA accepted software, and they're looking at costs at a high level to see planning level. Then if it's accepted and we pursue funding on these, pursue design, at that point, these will then be refined even further. Operation and maintenance goes into that. There are several other factors that really get into the benefit cost, and those are refined with data that is stronger than just a conceptual level. So I hope that helps provide a little comfort that you got to start somewhere with this, and it's by no means an end-all.
So I do understand your explanation that this is just a tool, broad strokes, but this agenda item has identified 3 specific projects to bring us to $2.16 million that we're essentially saying, yes, we want to do this. This decision has to be based on reality, not on these discrepancies that I've pointed out. That's where I'm at.
I understood. And as I mentioned, if we were to further pursue these, we would come again back to the board before we were to pursue that grant funding and before we were to, continue on with the design and the construction of these projects as part of our overall master plan of stormwater and flood mitigation. We have all these pieces of the puzzle. We have the west area, the north area. Those studies were done in 2020 and 2021. Now we're working on the east part that was, identified as a goal as part of these other adopted plans. We're also working on the southeast area. These are all the pieces of the puzzle. And then we put the whole puzzle together and identify the need as an overall city. So it's not that we're saying that these three projects, this is it. This is what we need to be doing. We have to find all these puzzle pieces so that we can look at the overall benefit of the city for the flood mitigation overall. Certain areas have very different flooding. A project identified in the west area plan, that's a $30 million project and is going to benefit thousands of residents, is very different than these projects where you have more of a localized shallow flooding that's impacting the roads. It's still valuable. It's still an area that we need to study and get information on. The projects are just going to be different than another area. So I understand your concerns. I understand that you want to see a level of detail and accurate information, and we agree.
May I ask, so the HAZUS report, the input to be able to execute the report, you're not entering in the number of buildings, so you're entering in a census tract?
Yes.
Because that's the level that it accepts. It
Yes.
doesn't let you.
It's pre-populated
Right.
data.
You don't get to say, let me see Laurel Road,
No.
let me see.
We did
Okay,
not
I just want
manipulate
to
it.
be clear on the record for the public, because I agree with Supervisor White that often what happens is I don't want the public to say we relied upon a HAZUS report to make our decisions, because he's correct. It's not accurate.
No.
It doesn't depict what's really in this area. But I just wanted to be clear that it's a tool that the federal government utilizes to allow access to
Yes.
potential federal funding, and it only looks at census tract. When we get ready to select the projects that we will submit for grants across our entire stormwater plan, we will then have much more detailed answers for this board to be making the decision on the expenditure for which projects.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
I just wanted to say it's not that you're doing a poor job, it's you only get to enter the census tract.
That's correct.
And then
Thank you.
it says what that census tract looks like. Apparently not quite so right, but that's not within the span of control of our staff or the contractor. It's just the first access look.
Neither will it preclude you from
Okay.
applying for grant funding in the future. A full-blown benefit cost analysis will require much more specific data for the project you are going after.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Supervisor Schutte?
Thank you. I think this conversation, and I agree, it really highlights the importance of a very strong purpose statement. And so reading through this, the city's stormwater program manager wanted to identify areas where mitigation solutions could be proposed to the residents to reduce the risk of property damage and maintain safe access to roads. And yesterday, also being on Water Subconservancy, I had the good fortune of being able to listen to your presentation, and also just the efforts that you made to not only listen to the objective of the city and why we're having this, but to listen to residents and make the extra effort to listen. And when reading the report, how some mitigations lead to other potential problems, and so the different alternatives. So Brianna, thank you for the conversation yesterday, our long phone call, in then, some of my concerns, or not a concern, but I had a question on, it would be your packet 4-43 or page 230, just the project recommendation for the conceptual designs and, taking into account the benefit cost ratio, the areas of interest, the cost, all of that. And it was helpful to discuss, and I think a lot about this in terms of other buildings that are bought, or how a building or a treatment or mitigation is built or developed, is what is its long-term use, what is its how much work and staff time and energy does it take to be functional. And so sometimes an investment a little bit more robust up front ultimately saves money. You're not having a lot of staff then going out and whether it's clearing channels or yesterday with Water Subconservancy, we toured parts of Douglas County and that have experienced severe flooding already, and the erosion is unbelievable. And just to hear the staff time that it took, and then renting big equipment to be able to fix the problem, or just to put a Band-Aid on it, and then 3 weeks later, in one case, they had to redo it. So I appreciate the comments, but I also really appreciate that we're looking at this as part of a bigger picture of what needs to be done.
Thank you. Supervisor Giomi.
I guess I'll just point out that there's over 100 pages of data here. Forget the HAZUS part. There's 132 pages of the purpose, of the methodology, of terrain, of hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. Those are all standard ways in which engineers and hydrologists make determination on floods and floodplains and modeling results. And so I don't find the report incomplete. I have quite a bit of experience working with HAZUS. It was designed primarily for earthquake modeling. That's how it started. And the design of it was at a much broader level, really at a county level. You can drill into it, but when HAZUS first came out, you could only do it at a county level. And then they expanded it over the years, and so I'm not troubled by the HAZUS report. It is the way in which a drainage study has to be done, because you have to get a benefit cost ratio. If you don't get a benefit cost ratio, you can't even apply for pre-disaster mitigation funds. And you can't get a benefit cost ratio easily without running a HAZUS report. So I'm not troubled by any of that. I'm not troubled by the data. There's a couple of things that I brought up last night. Do you put the water in a culvert? Do you put it in an open trench? I mean, I have questions about that, but we're not even close to that point. We're just trying to get a determination on broad scope of cost and finding a way that we might go after some pre-mitigation funds, whether they be available from FEMA or from some state grant opportunities that I think are coming out of this legislative session. So I'm comfortable with the report. I think it's well done, and I don't particularly think that this would be the highest priority in town, personally. But I also realize that some of the projects we have on the west side are millions and millions of dollars. And if we can go after $1.5 million and do something for a neighborhood, then we've got a plan that allows us to do that.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm fully aware of the need for this mitigation. It's pretty obvious. I have friends that live in that neighborhood. I'm familiar with the neighborhood. So my concern is not whether it needs to be done or not. My concern is the nature in which this study was created. And you can find that on page 217, 3-30, where you spend an entire paragraph talking about you didn't like the results, so you changed the study. I guess that's just the way it works. Well, yeah, where it says model results yielded lower than expected runoff, rather than using HEC-RAS default parameters that were developed for NDOT were used, and it says further refining was done for the initial moisture content assumptions and land use layer to arrive at more reasonable runoff volumes. I would suggest staff and the contractor had an opportunity to have some input and avoid something like saying 1 square mile of single-family 1 acre has 2,000 residents. That's pretty far off the mark.
So Supervisor White, I just want to say part of the modeling process is to do some validation. Granted, this watershed isn't calibrated. There's no gauge data information. There's no like specific storm that we could try to calibrate the model to. So in lieu of that data, what we have is talking to the residents. And so if they tell us, you know, this storm event happened recently and it flooded up to here, but our model default parameters, again, is what we start with. Our default parameters are telling us that that's not the case. We can look at additional measures and try to refine the model to be something closer to the validated input that the residents have given us.
Right.
And that's part of the process of validation.
And I do understand that this is a tool to allow the city to start looking for funding. And I also understand that as an engineer, you probably don't even need this study to know what has to be done out there. You guys can see that from the field, just standing there.
The
looking
residents
at it.
didn't either. They were pretty clear on what needed to be done, and we did listen to them.
Right. And so I just find it troubling that, you know, I'm going to keep banging on this 2,000 households in a square mile. That's just, anyway, let's move on.
All right, I just wanted to add one
You don't
comment.
think there's 20 people per house? No, sorry.
Just to clarify that paragraph that you read and Stephanie explained, that model validation is much different than what is being shown in that HAZAS report, because this is model validation that they have completed, different than that auto-generated report. So, thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? No.
Thank you. It looks like a really nice presentation, and I appreciate your effort, Supervisor and Board. I'm frustrated that we haven't paid attention to where we put places in the first place, to analyze things prior to the point we get now where we're looking for funding to fix the situations that we didn't take apparent attention to initially. We have the opportunity now that we're still under construction. Carson City's a constant growth, and I would hope that some of these studies would be done very carefully and cautiously before buildings are allowed, and we're allowing places in floodplains as they are now. I don't like this particular analysis, such a, support that you've looked into, that they have looked into, because it doesn't address things as they are. They're speculative. We got to get a base of what it is before we start speculating on what it takes to write the grant, in my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have any other public comment? No, Cindy? Okay, I'll bring you back up to the board. Does somebody want to make a motion? Supervisor Giomi, or Judy, go ahead.
I move to accept the East Carson City Area Drainage Plan and direct staff to explore funding opportunities for the identified drainage projects.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 17A, discussion and possible action regarding recommendations of the Carson City Audit Committee to approve the completed remediation plans and remove findings from the audit findings tracking report. That will be Ms. Russell Benaboo, but I will do my disclosure. NRS 281A 420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. My son is a partner at Eide Bailey. I have previously abstained from voting on the award of the contract to Eide Bailey as the city's internal auditor because I believed that the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my position could be materially affected by my relationship with my son. Here, however, the contract has already been awarded. My son does not have any direct involvement in this audit, and the item before us now only involves procedural actions in considering the audit committee's recommendations for the closure of items where remediation was validated by Eide Bailey. I make this disclosure in the full interest of transparency, but because taking action on this matter is routine function and does not materially affect the independence of my judgment, and because NRS 281A 420 requires abstention only in clear cases, I do not have a disqualifying conflict and will be voting on this matter. Thank you. If they make those any longer,
You talk for 3 minutes.
gee,
The alarm
that's,
went off on you.
golly. I'm like, there's got to be a way we can shorten these up. Per the law, I'm good. Sorry, go ahead. Ms. Benaboo.
Thank you very much. So I did provide a report, and in that report, it is colored, but I know you guys don't receive it in color.
Ours is
Oh,
colored.
you do? Oh, fabulous. That's great. You've been upgraded. Wonderful. So we're talking about the items that are in orange today. And I have to apologize. This is 2 meetings worth of recommendations with the legislature and the budget. We were just a little, preoccupied for the last couple months. So there are the community development items number 2, 5, and 7. The IT vulnerability update, items number 2 through 6, excuse me. Preliminary risk assessment of body-worn cameras, items 2 and 4. And then the utility billing process, number 2, 3, and 5. Were there any questions? I did receive a few questions from Nancy, but any other questions?
So on the IT vulnerability update, more just procedural on this, but I know that once we close them, I still like the record to be full. So if we ever have to pull something back up and look at something again. So I recognize on the IT one, there was follow-up audit that was done under the retest at the year later on item 6, but it retested items, so wouldn't we, if we would just fill in the auditor field for the retest, that it was verified?
Oh, the validation.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes, so just again, so that people recognize we did come back the year later as anticipated and reran.
Understand. Yes, I apologize for that. The initial audit was in 2020.
Right.
And it had several findings, and then they went through and did it all again and found a lot less. But we had either mitigated the risk or taken the risk out of the ballpark. So we fixed it. So yeah, we're closing this. I will, definitely. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything in the audit reports of discussion? No? Is there any public comment before we take action on this item? No? Okay, I'll accept a motion. Supervisor Giomi?
I move to approve the audit committee's recommendation as presented.
A motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now on agenda item 17B, and this is discussion and action for proposed changes on the plan of expenditure for the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, or otherwise known as ARPA, for allocation of the additional money to complete the tennis courts that we discussed at a prior meeting. Ms. Benaboo.
Yes, so at the April 20th meeting, when we discussed the budget and all the capital plans, we were asked to bring back ideas on how to fund the complete court system instead of just the 4 that we were looking at. So we did get some information from Parks and Public Works on how we would do that. So it was only 410,000 of the 841,000 that is available in the unallocated or undesignated section. This whole grant is already budgeted, so this would just be a budget transfer to move it into that line item if it's approved today.
Perfect. Any questions? It tracks with what we already directed staff to do, so thank you very much. Is there any public comment on this item? Mr. French.
Supervisors and board, thank you for your patience with me today. This agenda was very tough for me to get through, but I tried to do my due diligence. I went through the American Rescue Plan action of 2021, and what I could of it, I didn't see any reference to tennis courts. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Just for information purposes, that's why we're amending the plan of expenditure today to put them in so that we can expense those dollars. But, okay, motion by Supervisor White, please.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Okay, we're now on to, she's just going to sit there for a while. We're now on to agenda item 17C, discussion and possible action regarding our final budget for fiscal year 2024. Ms. Schutte, may I have your disclosure, please?
Yes, and I'll try to beat the 3-minute timeline. NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. This agenda item of the proposed Carson City fiscal year 2024 final budget, which includes the general fund, special revenue funds, enterprise funds, and all other budgeted funds in the city. My nephew, Chris Martinovich, is the city's transportation manager, and his salary is funded by the Regional Transportation Fund and Fleet. While I do have a familial relationship with Chris, this is a routine procedural matter for the broader purpose of taking action on the city's overall budget, and my nephew's salary is being considered along with other employee salaries in the aggregate. There is no discussion specific to Chris's individual salary, nor is there any discussion specifically related to the position of transportation manager. Additionally, Nevada's ethics laws give appropriate deference to the public policy of the state, which favors the right of a public official to perform the duties for which the public official was elected or appointed, and to vote because abstention disrupts the normal course of representative government. Since abstention is only required in clear cases where the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my situation would be materially affected, and I do not believe that to be the case because this agenda matter concerns broad policy considerations related to budgetary issues as a whole, I make this disclosure for full transparency, but I will be voting.
Thank you. Mr. Horton, your disclosure, please.
Start the clock.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, what she said times 2.
Change the job. Yeah.
NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. This agenda item, the proposed Carson City fiscal year 2024 final budget, which includes the general fund, special revenue funds, enterprise funds, and all other budgeted funds in the city. I have 2 sons who are employed by the fire department. While I do have a familial relationship with 2 Carson City employees, this is a routine procedural matter for the broader purpose of taking action on the city's overall budget, and my son's salaries and any benefits they may receive from supplemental requests, such as the purchase of firefighting equipment, are being considered along with other firefighter employees in the aggregate. There is no discussion specifically to their individual salaries, nor is there any discussion specifically related to their individual positions. Additionally, Nevada's ethics laws give appropriate deference to the public policy of the state, which favors the right of the public official to perform the duties for which he was elected, for which the public official was elected or appointed, and to vote because abstention disrupts the normal course of representative government. Since abstention is only required in clear cases where the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my situation would be materially affected. And I do not believe that to be the case because the agenda matter concerns broad policy considerations related to budgetary issues as a whole. I make this disclosure for full transparency, but will be voting. Time.
Thank you so much. Okay, Ms. Benaboo. Thank you.
All right. So this is to present our final budget, and hopefully that's legible. It looks kind of small. So we go from the tentative budget that we presented on April 20th, and all of the changes, some of them already approved, the supplemental and the capital that we talked about on April 20th, and then takes us to the final 2024 budget. Of course, our Eagle Eye mayor did spot a little error, and
I wasn't going to tell on you. Just to let you do it.
So that has been corrected in the budget memo. It was a last minute change, so those last minute changes always trip us up. There's always one thing we miss. So per NRS, we're required to have a public hearing, at which time we must indicate any changes that were made from the tentative to final budget. And all those changes are incorporated. I'm only really going to talk about the final adjustments that we didn't talk about previously in the April 20th meeting. So we kind of already talked about the head lifeguard position. That's the $65,833. We did not talk about the amount. So I did add that. There was $5,000 for our portion of the Tahoe Transportation District. And then there was slight changes in the South Carson Street NID after we'd finalized that. So we made those changes. There's a weird little 1,179 in the capital that looks, I understand that looks a little strange. After the landfill was approved, it did change the fleet percentage a little bit. And so that's what that is. It's just a calculation, and it changed the capital a little bit. Supplemental indigent, again, there was an ending fund balance of $7,002 with the original budget. And I'm not quite sure how that happened. The ending fund balance is always $5,000. So I just took that 2002 and put it in the indigent assistance fund that we have available there that we're getting from the
And the objective for
from the
that
refund.
is to be able to expense it if necessary for
Exactly,
indigent services.
exactly. If it's stuck in fund balance, we
It's-
cannot spend it in
right.
2024. So this just gives us the
not a
ability to
law or
spend it.
anything, but we just have
Right.
used 5,000 as our flooring.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
thank you.
The capital projects fund, these are really just, again, moving things around that were approved. And then we take out that landfill capital because they got operational increases in the general fund for supplementals. So that's what that is. The landscape maintenance fund, just supplemental, little supplemental changes to the salaries. The South Carson Street NID, this is the little adjustment to the transfers that we made after we got the final numbers in. Carson City Transit, just supplemental request, same thing with quality of life, nothing final. Street maintenance, that is, again, a little South Carson Street NID adjustment. And then Campo did have some final changes. What was brought to RTC, we did adjust in the final budget because they had final numbers as to what the grant was going to look like. So we added that to the budget. So revenue and expense, the effect is really zero. Extraordinary maintenance fund, just what was approved in capital, wastewater. I think the rest were just what was approved. There weren't, oh wait, building permits. We did have some tweaks here. There was a senior construction inspector where we added the 10% to sewer and water, which the other 80% didn't get added to building permits. We unfortunately did this as part of getting ready for the Utility Finance Oversight Committee, and so we were rushing to get the water and sewer done and said we'd do that later, and it just never got done. So we caught it, we're putting it in for the final budget here. And that's it, those are all the changes.
Does any member have a question? Pretty much everything we discussed. Okay, is there any public comment? None? I'll accept a motion then. Supervisor Horton.
I move to approve the Carson City final budget for FY 2024 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Another year
done. Yes, I will submit it June 1st as required, and as soon as I have all the signatures of the board members on the first page there, I'll start duplicating copies and give you all a copy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. Does anyone need a recess, or are we good to go? Everybody okay? Well, that's where I'm at right now. So that's what I said. Do you want
No, there's this first.
I think there's CSSG first.
D? Oh, you're ready when we get to the next one. Okay, gotcha. 17D, discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of the proposed resolution for $429,096 in total funds from the Community Support Grant. Supervisor Giommi, a disclosure, please.
My
That
turn,
was
thank you.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
I can do it. NRS 281A420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. This item is on a resolution to authorize funding expenditures from the Community Support Services Grant. In my private commitment, I am employed by Nevada Health Centers, and I also serve as a volunteer board member for Advocates to End Domestic Violence and Nevada Rural Counties RSVP. All three of these organizations have been recommended for funding. Although the recommended funding is made by an application review group without my involvement or input, this board may choose to accept, deny, or modify those funding recommendations. I also have a fiduciary duty to these organizations and have a substantial and continuing business relationship with my employer. Because the judgment of a reasonable person in my position would be materially affected by these relationships, I make this disclosure for full transparency, and I will not be voting on this matter.
Thank you. Well, so he can recess now. Yeah, okay. There you go. You're off. Ms. Phipps, are you going to take us through this?
Yeah,
And welcome
I
to the
actually
team.
wanted to introduce
I was just gonna
Ms.
say,
Ms.
go ahead.
Phipps.
Welcome
Yeah,
to
this
the
is
team.
Rebecca Phipps. She took over for Mariana Gavrich, who left her office. So our new grants administrator, we're very, very excited to have her.
Well, I'm liking that she's excited to be here. Let's keep it that way. Go ahead.
For the record, my name is Rebecca Phipps, Grants Administrator. This submission is to discuss, review, and approve the Community Support Services Funding and Quality of Life Initiative for fiscal year 2024, as recommended by the Application Review Work Group, subject to approval from the Carson City Board of Supervisors. The calculation for this funding is 0.4% of the general fund expenditures. The adult and youth competitive category is split based upon U.S. Census for the Carson City population. The ARWG has made a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors based on the amount available, the scores of the applications, and the Carson City critical needs criteria met by each program. Carson City received 8 Community Support Services grant applications. The total funding available for FY 2024 is $429,096. The ARWG has recommended that $145,976 be awarded for the competitive programs. Staff recommends that $163,120 to be awarded for non-competitive adult and youth programs for the third year, and $120,000 to be awarded for the Boys and Girls Club of Western Nevada from the Quality of Life Initiative. All projects meet the CSSG program critical needs and are eligible for funding.
Thank you. Does any member have a question for any of the applicants? Actually, is anyone here from the Senior Service Network? Ms. Therese, great, come on up, come on up. It's more a new program to me, so you'll be on the hook a little bit.
Okay.
So can you tell me a little bit about where does this operate? What's the board goals? And just, it's new to me, and so I'm interested in the selection of your services and what happens in the senior service network?
Well, thank you for having me. Jenny Treese, Vice President of the Senior Service Network. And I joined the board about 7 years ago with the mission of Senior Service Network being to provide emergency assistance to seniors in need. A Senior in Need grant, as much as $500 can be awarded to an individual who may be facing eviction or has a problem with their car that needs repair or utility bill assistance. And we cover the Northern Nevada region, so we certainly have Carson City consideration, but we also would assist someone in Lyon County or someone who lives in Virginia City. And in general, for an example, a shot of what we've done, we provided 66 seniors in a year, a total of $38,000 in grant money spread out. And so, excuse me, that was a 2-year period. And we assist, we're also very active with referral services. So working with St. Vincent de Paul or Ron Wood, we will always be there as a opportunity to consider a grant for a senior if they've run out of funding.
So can you tell me what are your major sources of funding?
Well, I am so pleased to have just done the senior celebration. We had a record number of vendors at this event. We held it on May 11th at the Casino Fandango, and 70 vendors, sponsors, and they pay for their vendor booth. It is a senior health fair, and it is our signature fundraiser. We are excited to branch into these kinds of grants because we have relied on funding the Senior in Need grant program from the senior celebration event in the past.
Okay, so just for clarity's sake, so this award is for $12,000 to assist in utility shut-off notices. And so because your network is larger than Carson City, I wanted to assure that the $12,000 or to acknowledge it can only be spent for a Carson City resident. And I just want that on the record to recognize, so when you're applying them, if you're gonna, because it's a reimbursement, that you acknowledge that it has to be a Carson City resident.
Absolutely. We discussed it at a board meeting, as a matter of fact, yesterday, that we would set a restricted fund. We would have a separate fund, and we would be providing data and all sorts of study on tracking the information for you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have a question or, except for Stacy? Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Come on up.
Thank you, Board of Supervisors and public. My name is Ed Choklik. I'm the president of the St. Vincent de Paul Society. We get a lot of requests for different types of financial support, and I wanted to sort of elaborate on what's been going on the utility side of the business right now. So most of you probably know Fish administers the NV Energy SAFE program and the Southwest Gas Energy Share program, which is the really first line of defense our citizens have for utility bill assistance. So they get so much money per month, they usually run out of money. What's been happening though, and it's very unfortunate, is that the State Office of Welfare, who administers the state energy assistance program, we've been told they're anywhere to 4 to 6 months behind processing renewals and applications. So Fish has been getting a lot of requests. We've been getting a lot of requests because of this. I think it had to do with COVID. It had to do with people not hiring back into the state offices. But we normally spend about $9,000 a year doing utility bill assistance as Plan B to Fish. We've already spent $12,000 in 6 months this year doing that utility bill assistance. I would say probably since February 1st, We get 10 to 20 calls a week asking for utility bill assistance in a range anywhere from $100 to $900. So it's a huge need out there. It's great timing, I think, to put another agency in the mix of that. I look at it as a win-win for us in that they cater strictly to people over 60 who are on fixed income. Whatever they can do through your support, I don't have to do, and I can put that money to other things. So I think this is a great win-win for the city and its residents. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll just for the record indicate one of the things when we originally started this program, well, long ago, Supervisor Bonkowski and I worked extremely hard to put the parameters, the allocations, the methodologies, and one of the things that we were overly concerned about is duplication of service. And so we also wanted to be able to have referral organizations for the particular service we wanted to articulate. And so part of my concern, not the need or not the is there need, is did I want to silo another provider for utilities? And so this board has previously selected Fish as our vendor for our water sewer utility assistance account for the very reason that you indicated, because they already had Southwest Gas and Sierra Nevada for the energy bill. And so part of that, or NV Energy, it used to be Sierra Pacific Power Company, well, we still remember, but that it would be a one-stop shop and a rule, and that the criteria would be identical, to access the money. And so the more that you spread out utility assistance, each of you as boards create your own funding rules to that utility dollars. So maybe the senior service network pretend does 500% of poverty, and St. Vincent de Paul says we help at 300%, and Fish helps at 200%. And so I'm not going to not approve this, but for the future, for the committee and for all of you service providers, I'm really looking for you to explain to me the gap. And the question for me is, why wouldn't I give the $12,000 to Fish to expand that service? And so I don't need an answer this time, because I said I'm comfortable with approving, but it's the next step in CSSG funding. I want to make sure every dollar that the residents of Carson City are supplying to help those in need is getting its most useful access, and that we're getting the largest bang for the buck. Because one of the things that, in Carson City, we do not shut off water and sewer. We don't shut it off. We end up leaning it against your property. And that's why it's in the owner's name, not the renter's name, so we can lien the property. And so I asked staff to tell me, because I wanted a feel for how bad is utilities with all these huge rate increases that are going on. How bad is our community suffering under utility? And I have to tell you how much it shocked me. What was it? 600 and some odd accounts went into default, and 400 and some odd $1,000 was not paid in water sewer bills for Carson City that we ended up leaning onto their properties. So that's why I'm saying I'm going to go ahead and let this go through, but I think we need a little more robust future discussion in utility assistance. So, but yeah, that was quite shocking to see how much money was not paid to our just our utility. So I imagine it's even worse at Southwest Gas and NV Energy, because if they're not paying their water sewer bill, I'm guessing they're not paying those either. So,
And we do have the URAP program.
well, that's what I said.
We don't have a lot of participants typically in that, but if you're having trouble paying your bill, we have the URAP program.
Well, and that's the issue at hand. I did make the phone call, and so that's what I meant by we just need a little further discussion or recognition, and where do you get utility assistance? What are the criteria to access those utility dollars and stuff? So anyway, we can do that as a further discussion later, but does anyone else? Nothing? Okay, I'm ready for a motion.
I move to adopt resolution number 2023-R-11.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those no say no, and one abstention for Supervisor Giomi. Thank you all, and thank you all as the nonprofits and organizations in the room that do so much to help our residents. Thank you. It's an important thing. So, all right, we will stand in recess for like 5 minutes, and then we'll come back as the Redevelopment Authority. call the Redevelopment Authority to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Bagwell,
Here.
Vice Chair Giomi, Member Horton, Member Shute,
Here.
Member White. All present.
Quorum is
Yep.
established. Thank you. Is there any general public comment for the Redevelopment Authority? Redevelopment Authority. No. Okay. So don't see any. We'll move on to approval of our minutes of April 2023. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the Carson City Redevelopment Authority meeting minutes of April 20th, 2023 as presented.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. We're now on agenda item 23A, discussion and possible action regarding the Carson City Redevelopment Authority final budget. Miss, oh, that says Russell. Somebody cut and paste. Banaboo.
Oh,
I'm gonna
man,
say it
my
right.
fault.
Oh, it's the slight we have to endure.
I try to catch them every time. Yeah, so the only change here was a slight increase of 8,291 for the downtown NID. We did have a meeting with them, and this was the outcome of that meeting.
Right, to agree on the funding. Anybody got any questions on redevelopment? Supervisor Wade.
I noticed that this list that is on, let me get there, page 533, that's not the same list that's in the next agenda item on page 547. Same? Sorry, I've been busy with a storm drain study.
Isn't the difference?
So what Hope is getting approved for today is just the revolving fund. It does not include the operations fund 602. So I'm doing the budgets for 602, which is the operations. 603 is the revolving, where they spend most of their money out of, and then 604 is where we collect the taxes and pay any debt. So I'm doing all three funds. The budget, this is the final budget for all three funds, and then Hope is digging it a little more into the detail and getting approval on actually spending those funds.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, other questions? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none. Supervisor Giomi, a motion, please.
I move to approve the Carson City Redevelopment Authority final budget for fiscal year 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We are now on to agenda item 24A, discussion and possible action regarding a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for expenditures of $3,823,708 from fiscal year 24 redevelopment revolving fund to support the various events, incentives, and capital improvement projects that are included in the FY24 redevelopment and capital budget. Ms. Sullivan.
Essentially, you've just approved the budget, so the redevelopment authority is being asked to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to authorize the expenditure of the 2024 revolving fund consistent with the approved budget.
Any questions? Any questions? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion. Supervisor Giomi.
I will get there. I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of the expenditures as presented.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no.
No.
Let the record reflect 4 ayes, 1 no by Supervisor White. Okay. We are now on agenda item 24B, which is discussion and possible action regarding the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors concerning the $50,000 from fiscal year 23 redevelopment funding to support the downtown gateway feature. Ms. Sullivan, anything else on that item?
No, this is just this FY23 money. You made some fairly recent changes to that for the gateway feature, so this would authorize the expenditure of those funds before July 1. Thank you.
Any questions? I see no questions. Is there any public comment on this item? Mr. French.
Supervisor and board, thank you very much. On this item, I have a question on there not being specific about what that funding, that item is for, the gateway item. Could someone just make
That was the Mills Park Gateway?
the Mills Park gateway?
No, the one for the roundabout gateway?
Right.
We had two.
If
Well,
some,
we're doing
and
both.
my understanding from the cultural meeting that I went to was that it was going to be a piece of an artwork. Is that still?
Yeah, that we put out to bid or
Okay.
put out requests for, they're not technically bids, whatever, proposals.
Right, I would have liked it not to be a search that's open to everybody, but perhaps people in Carson, but that's been set up by the cultural board or committee, and so I will respect that, but I would have rather with all the talent we have locally that it would have been limited to such, and that amount of money seems extreme. But thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Thank you.
Gateway? Okay. Supervisor White, the motion?
I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of the expenditure as proposed.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. We're now on final public comment for the Redevelopment Authority. Do I have any? Okay, great. Seeing none, we will adjourn as the Redevelopment Authority and reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. Let the record reflect all board members are still present. May I have agenda item 28A is under our community development. Discussion and possible action regarding a proposed resolution authorizing the expenditure of $3,823,708 from fiscal year 24 redevelopment revolving fund to support the various events, incentives included in the FY24 redevelopment budget. We have just heard all of the information on there. Is there any additional questions from members of the board that were not covered? No? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion. Once this one requires 4 out of the 5 of us to pass it.
I move to adopt resolution number 2023-R-12.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're on agenda item 28B, discussion and possible action regarding the proposed resolution for the expenditure of the $50,000 fiscal year 23 redevelopment revolving fund for the downtown gateway feature. Again, we just had that item under redevelopment. Is there any additional questions? Seeing none. Any public comment? No. I'll accept a motion, please.
I move to adopt resolution number 2023-R-13.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're now on agenda item 28C, discussion and possible action regarding the consideration of complaints, protests, objections for fiscal year 2024 Downtown Neighborhood Improvement District assessment or the assessment role of the property and advisability of amending the DNID ordinance and discussion. Consideration of any hardship determinations related to the FY24 NID, downtown NID assessment, and whether to direct the city engineer to postpone the assessment for any approved hardship determination, and a resolution confirming the DNID assessment, dispensing with complaints, protests, objections to the assessment and the ordinance amendment, and ratifying the city engineer's FY24 assessment role for the DNID. Ms. Sullivan, have we received any hardship requests?
No.
So none. Are there any in the audience that want to testify on this item for any hardships or any issues related to this agenda item? No, no one has a hardship, so none for us to dispense with. Can you take us through any legal action or anything necessary for the board?
Just for the benefit of the record, there's also, in advance of this meeting, we had not received any complaints, protests, or objections. So in addition to no hardships, none of those were received. I'd also like to note that the recommendation is that the city contribute $3,700 $37,284. I'll say that number one more time. $37,284, as back in ordinance 2016-1, when this NID was first established, there was a portion of that ordinance that said the city would never pay less than $37,284. That came up in discussions with the downtown NID, and the board members advised that many people petitioned for this neighborhood improvement district based on that commitment by the city. And so we had gone to a lower number. And so to honor that commitment, we are suggesting that we do allocate why can I not say this number? $37,284, and that the city not pay less than that. Additionally, regarding the improvements on Curry Street, those are not accepted yet. There's some warranty items there, but in 2025, the properties that front along Curry Street that are currently being assessed at 75% will be assessed at 100%. So I want to state that for the benefit of the record. So in a year, when you see the assessment rolls, you'll see those properties at 100% assessment. And that's consistent with the ordinance. That's all I had to add. Thank you.
Does any member have a question? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment? Just general? None? Okay. Supervisor Giomi?
I move to adopt resolution number 2023-R-14.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on agenda item 28D, discussion and possible action regarding the consideration. We're going to do this for the same thing for the South Carson NID district. Please note that we are discussing from late material. Just so everybody is clear, the action we are taking is based on the late material that was presented for item 28D. Did we receive any requests for hardship determinations, complaints, et cetera? Any received?
No, we did not in advance of this meeting.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public that actually would like us to consider a hardship or complaint? Then we have none to dispense with, okay? Anything you want to give us a little bit of the changes or updates from the late material?
The late material was, we just determined an error in terms of the frontage on one of the properties. That was corrected, and so the distribution of the funds was reassigned, but the total assessment did not change. For the benefit of the two people in the audience who I've spoken to this morning, the numbers I provided to them are correct. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, I'll accept a motion then. Supervisor Horton, that'll teach y'all not to push your buttons.
I move to adopt resolution number 2023-R-15.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're now on agenda item 28E, which is discussion and possible action to introduce on first reading an ordinance for the downtown neighborhood improvement district for fiscal year 24. Mr. Hohen, may I have the title, please?
An ordinance relating to improvement districts levying the fiscal year 2024 assessment for the downtown neighborhood improvement district, amending the DNID ordinance under Chapter 271 of the Nevada Revised Statutes, and providing other matters properly relating thereto.
Thank you so much. Again, just for the record, we are looking at late material for this item. Ms. Sullivan, take us through this.
Mayor, this is Todd Reese, Deputy DA, for the record. I will detail some of the changes just at a very high level, and then, of course, I'm available for any questions you may have. The amendments for both, Madam Mayor.
Maybe I need to open both items because it's consistent?
Yes, do you mind if we open both items?
No problem. Let the record reflect. We're also opening 25F at this time. We'll take separate motions. Mr. Hohen, may I have the title for 28F, please?
An ordinance relating to improvement districts levying the fiscal year 2024 assessment of the South Carson Neighborhood Improvement District, amending the S South NID ordinance under Chapter 271 of the Nevada Revised Statutes and providing other matters properly relating thereto.
Thank you. So let the record reflect both items are open, and so his comments reflect both of them. Mr. Reese.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In general, the amendments relate to the administration of the NIDS and not the assessment methods. The assessment methods are generally staying the same. There is added to both ordinances a 10% administration fee if the city administers the NIDS. In the South Carson Street NID, there is also a 5% fee if the city does not administer the NID. That is not included in the downtown NID because it has not been included since 2016. The method of calculating the annual assessment, method of distributing the annual assessment will not change. The method of calculating what the annual assessment, the budget for the NIDS will change. It's instead of based on the consumer price index, it's now based on 5-year maintenance projections, including maintenance costs that are incurred less than annually. So for example, crack sealing is done every 2 years or so, and this specifically requires that to be considered so that it can be saved, so that amounts can be saved for that on an annual basis. The maintenance or the reserve accounts are changed to be maintained at a 20% reserve or greater, as approved by the board in the annual assessments and as put forward by the administrator of the NIDS in the budget provided to the board. Assessments there's generally a cap of a 5% increase in the total expenditures for the NID. That includes both the city's contribution and the assessment. And for the South Carson Street NID, the contributions from the licensing agreements for the properties along South Carson Street. There's the board can approve a higher increase, but the general idea is to provide a reliable, a consistent assessment to all the businesses and properties being assessed. The city's contribution for the DNID, downtown NID, as Ms. Sullivan mentioned, will be $37,284 for fiscal year 24. The ordinance has that going forward. The ordinance has a 40% contribution from the city, but not less than the $37,284. The city's contribution to the South Carson Street NID is approximately 15% of the overall expenditures of the NID. With that, that's all the comments I had that I wanted to highlight for the ordinance. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer them.
So just in general, for clarity of record, I want to, two things. One, thank the Downtown NID Board for working so diligently with us to come to where we are today, to get this accomplished, and to be clear on the record that the city will contribute for the downtown NID the minimum $37,284. At the conclusion of that fiscal year with the actual expenditures, we will contribute up to the 40%, but not less than $37,284. But I want you to recognize its actual expenditures at that time. We'll look at the real bill and true like a truing up. So we'll put the $37,284 in the account, and then we'll wait till all the bills process for the year, and hopefully Ms. Benaboo won't have to do a lot, but she may have to reconcile, put that one on the list for further reconciliation to see if we owe them any more dollars. But I wanted to put that on the record that that really is the substantial change that we made and negotiated with those. I also want to be perfectly honest, I don't think everyone in the downtown NID 100% agrees that that's what they'd like to see, but it's what we came to be able to get somewhere and to move it along. So does anyone have any questions? No? Is there any public comment on item 28E or 28F? And again, it's based on late material for both items. Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back up to here. We'll take action first on item 28E. Supervisor Schutte?
I move to introduce on first reading Bill number 108.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. I'll now take the motion on item 28F. Too many
I
numbers.
move to introduce on first reading Bill number 109.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Again, thank you everyone for the several iterations and work on those, but we have a better product. We're now on to agenda item number 29, which is our non-action items. Ms. Paulson, do you have any updates for us?
Yes, just a couple on the next meeting. I keep wanting it to be June 2nd, but it's June 1st, I think. We'll have the Board of Health. Yes, it's already that time again. But it looks like the rest of the agenda is going to be pretty light. And then I just wanted to let everyone know that for the CDBG grants, this year we transitioned back to going directly through the feds, getting a direct allocation, and that will be coming second meeting in July probably.
Is there any updates? Supervisor Giomi?
Yeah, just wanted to report on a few things from our outside board activities. Last night, we had our Carson Water Sub-Conservancy District meeting, and although I wasn't there for the tour, Supervisor Schutte was. They did some touring of some of the flood damage that Douglas County has experienced. I think they said they were in the neighborhood of $8 or $9 million worth of public damage from flooding starting in January and to be continued because it's not over yet. Also, and this is a number that's going to shock you, but if you think about it for a second, it'll make sense. The latest snow water equivalent for the Carson River Basin is 1,000% of normal. So to put that in some context, that number is measured as compared to this day, or excuse me, the end of May this year versus the end of May every other year. So some of those numbers may be a little bit skewed because there's snow in places that there normally isn't this time of year. So that's why it's so high. Carson Tourism Authority. They were going to do an international rugby league, and that they couldn't make the deals work. So there is a California Rugby League, and so on July 15th at Carson High School, they worked out a deal to bring in 4 rugby games, 1, 3, 5, and 7. I don't know if there's going to be a charge or not since it's at the high school. In any case, if you're interested in rugby, one of those will be 3 are men's teams and 3 and 1 game is a women's team. And they hope to sort of see what it's like in this area. And if it goes well, they'll bring a national team in, an international team, I should say. Mark Twain Days, the full accounting is not done yet. I've asked the CTA executive director to possibly, since the board was a big player in that, to do a presentation once the numbers are done. So he'll come and do that. But of the 7 ticketed events, 4 of them sold out. So that's good news. The Twain Train sold out at 210 people. The Living History performance sold out at just under 200. The Walking in Sam's Shoes was 160. The Paint and Sip was 40. And then the Bow Tie Ball had 90 attendees, which was not maxed out. And finally, in October, Bronco Magazine is having what they call a Super Bronco celebration of Ford Broncos. It's a Ford Bronco get together. So they'll be at the OHV area. They'll be at Mills Park. The last event was last year in Nashville, Tennessee, and it drew 400 Ford Broncos. So I don't know if we'll get that many, but it'll be kind of fun to go see it. October, I don't know if I have the date. It's in October. More to follow. But the next big date's July 15th for those rugby games over at Carson High School. That's it. Thanks.
Supervisor Shitty, did you have some stuff to share?
I do. Just to piggyback a little bit on the tour yesterday from Carson Water Subconservancy District. You know, it just really highlighted the importance of, and a kudos to Carson City for investing in stormwater mitigation. While winters like this don't happen often, the fact that they do happen and looking at the damage done to some, actually some open areas and that kind of price tag, really it's significant. And so I appreciate that this community addresses it. And, with this winter, even driving down Carson Street and thinking about previous flood events, the kayaking in front of, Sportsman's Warehouse, that's stormwater mitigation. We weren't able to kayak this year, so that's a good thing. I also, I want to give a shout out to city staff. The last couple of weeks with the phone calls I've received from the public and reaching out to city staff, they have really been wonderful in terms of the follow-up, and so I appreciate that. And a shout out to put on my animal hat for a minute. Last Saturday, Carson City's Nevada Humane Society featured a neuter event, and 50 dogs and 28 cats were neutered. And that's huge because that impacts surrenders to the shelter. It impacts animals running at large. It impacts all of the issues that occur when there are more animals, more pets than there are homes. So that is a huge cost savings for our community, and the folks who brought their dogs and cats in, they were so grateful and so appreciative. And then this Saturday, we think about nonprofit work, and there are several on Saturday for Pets of the Homeless Wellness Clinic at Fish. And Cassie will be there, local vets will be there, and to really help meet the needs of our pet owners who are struggling with homelessness. They still love their animals, and they really care deeply. These are family members for them, and so vaccination, wellness check, and spay neuter vouchers, which is quite amazing. So yay team and yay nonprofits, and that's collaboration at its finest. So thanks.
I think Saturday will be busy throughout the entire community. The city itself has 3 events all at the same time from 10 to 2. I thought we managed that well. But there's something to do if you want to on Saturday in Carson City. So we're going to have great weather and a good time at all 3 events. So I have figured out how I can make all 3. So just have some fun, bring your kids, and really enjoy. So, but nobody else has anything? Okay. We are now on, we will have a closed door meeting, just to put on the record. Is there any final public comment? Okay, seeing none. We are adjourned. Oh, did you want one? Oh, no, him. Sorry. We're done. Yeah. Yes.
Denny French, Carson City. I'd like to appreciate all of your work. Just trying to keep up with this agenda on basic reading was tough. I also would like to bring up the Jack bus and appreciation to the drivers and the staff, their intent to or consideration of expansion seems to be delayed based on salaries. They're not having a great deal of recruitment. And so I don't know what you all as a board can do, but if you could increase their budget to allow for more pay for their drivers, I think that would add to the incentive of drivers staying for one, and then perhaps recruiting in another. And just to say that you will probably be very pleased to hear this. I will be off the boards for a while as far as my activities because of circumstances, but I will keep my eye on you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Denny, and be well.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you all so very much. Great, another.